Wild Girls Weekend leads to 2 breakups and a divorce. I call that a triple play. Now let's get into this story, and here's the original post. Hey, I'm sharing this because I did something really wrong and it's eating me up inside. I hope someone can help me out here. I'm feeling pretty awful about what I've done, and I could really use some advice to fix things. It's a mess and I'm desperate for some guidance. I'm a 24-year-old female. I'll refer to myself as Rachel and my boyfriend, now ex-boyfriend, I'll call Evan. We had been dating for a total of 4 months, intimate for the past 2.5. He is the love of my life, but I'm afraid I've lost him forever. Well, let me stop you right there. He might feel like the one, but let's be real, 10 weeks isn't enough to be the love of your life. Let me break down what's going on now. Evan and I crossed paths through this cool singles club that gets together for various activities, hiking, rowing, volleyball, you name it. From the first time I saw Evan, I fell in love with him. No, you didn't. You fell in lust with him. We talked briefly that day and from there started texting each other about upcoming group outings. Our initial conversational sessions didn't go any further than that. I was persistent though, and eventually he asked me out. I was thrilled, but he took things really slow. At the beginning, I believed he only considered me a pal because he didn't show any signs of liking me. But thinking about it later, it seems like he was playing a tricky game. It turned out, on our very first date's end, all we did was bump our fists together. The second time we went out, he hugged me like a friend. And shockingly, by our third date, he surprised me with a sudden peck on my cheek. It was like a slow, sneaky reveal of his feelings. Well, I have to agree with her here. This guy is moving at a snail's pace if he was really interested in this girl. Finally, after 7 dates spread out over 6 weeks, we were intimate. It was a truly glorious experience, by far the most fulfilling I ever had. As I said, I fell in love with him at first sight. I quickly cut off other guys I was dating at the time, and for the past 10 weeks, we have spent every evening together. Our physical chemistry is excellent. I know a lot of this was due to it being new, but this was different. Our intimacy is different. I've told him countless times that I love him, but he has never said it back. From the way he behaves around me, it's clear as day that he's head over heels, but a girl's intuition is a powerful thing. I reckon he aimed to keep an air of mystery, not diving headfirst into commitment, and I admired that about him. Now, let me dive into the roller coaster that was 2 weekends back, where I inadvertently messed up my own happiness. Let's introduce Mia, my best friend, and her sister into the mix. Call her Lily. Invited me to a girls' weekend at a lake cabin Mia rented to celebrate Lily's 30th birthday. Along with Mia, and 2 of Lily's married friends from her neighborhood would be attending as well. I'll call them Grace and Claire. At first I had no interest in going as I didn't want to be away from Evan, but eventually decided to go. That Friday afternoon, I met Evan at his apartment, and we spent quality time together before I left for the 90-minute drive to the cabin. Little did I know this would potentially be the last time we ever shared intimacy, so they got it on there before she left to drive to the cabin. That night, all of us ladies met up at the cabin at 7 and went out to dinner. We had a blast, chatting and giggling the whole night away. By the time we made it back to the cabin, we were utterly exhausted and just conked out. The next morning was all about whipping up a lavish breakfast, sipping mimosas, and continuing our conversations. The afternoon saw us lounging by the pool, soaking up the sun's rays, and that's when things took a turn. We crossed paths with a gang of guys who turns out were renting a cabin just 4 doors away from ours. We all casually chatted throughout the afternoon, and we told them we were there to celebrate Lily's birthday. That night we girls headed out to a different restaurant to celebrate Lily's birthday. Everything went well. However, Lily, Mia, and I did get a little tipsy. When we got back, it was after midnight. While we were sitting around decompressing, there was a knock at the door. We were terrified, thinking, who could it be at that hour? Mia looked out and said it was the pool guys, the guys they met that afternoon at the swimming pool. They had 2 bottles of champagne and a bunch of plastic champagne glasses. They said they came to wish Lily a happy birthday. Grace and Claire said not to let them in, but Mia already did. Even though we were all tired from being in the sun all day and drinking all night, Lily and I accepted their offer. Big mistake, ladies. Big mistake. Grace and Claire looked unsettled by this and went up to bed. So these 2 ladies weren't having it before doing so. Grace said these guys shouldn't be here. Lily told her it was okay. Hindsight is a curious thing. I really wish we'd heeded Grace's advice. All 6 of us went through all the champagne we had. But here's the kicker, folks. Eventually, each of us ended up matched with one of the guys, retreating to different bedrooms. Wrap your head around this. They had only met these guys in the afternoon, let's say around 12 or 1 p.m. And now, fast forward 12 hours later, they're heading up to bed with them. Oh my goodness. When I woke up in the AM, the guy was still laying beside me. He looked like an ugly beast. Second, I walked down the hall to use the bathroom. On the way, I peeked in both Mia and Lily's rooms and saw they both were sound asleep alongside the guys they spent the night with. I felt awful. Why? You should feel awful. I then noticed the doors to Grace's and Claire's rooms were open. When I looked inside, the beds were made. I then looked outside and saw their cars were gone. I then went into Lily's room and told her that her friends left. Hearing this, she sprang out of bed and went into panic mode. She called and texted both of them, but they didn't answer. In the midst of it all, she broke into tears and roused the guy next to her, insisting he had to go. Rushing into Mia's room, she shook her awake and swiftly escorted Mia's guy out too. As the chaos unfolded, the guy I was with caught wind of the commotion and emerged from his room fully clothed. Lily, clearly upset, declared last night a colossal error and demanded that all the guys vacate the premises immediately. The guys had a WTF look on her face and headed down the stairs. As we all started walking down the steps, there was a loud knock at the door and a guy's voice was shouting to open up. Lily said, "Oh my God, it's my husband," and started crying. The guys looked fearful. Mia directed them to the back door and let them out that way. Once outside, they took off running across the backyard. Lily's husband, whom I'll call Daniel, saw them and started yelling at them walking towards the back of the cabin. Thankfully, he didn't pursue them. He then came in the back door and just started yelling. It was an ugly and scary situation. I've never seen anyone so angry. Daniel called Lily the most vile names you can imagine. He eventually left the cabin, banging the door so hard that one of the deer trophies fell off the wall. Daniel pulled out, sending gravel against the front windows. Thankfully, none of them broke. Lily then grabbed her keys and ran out the door to follow Daniel. Nia and I were left there alone, stunned at what just happened. It was obvious that Grace and Claire went right home and told Daniel about what went on that night. The shock of it all hit us hard. We never expected friends to betray each other in such a way. Hold on though, I need to correct the record. Grace and Claire actually acted in the best interest of everyone involved. They sensed that things were heading downhill and tried to intervene, but their efforts were brushed aside. So, they made a smart call and left. I bet they went straight home and filled their husbands in on the whole situation, seeking guidance and support from them. They probably decided, hey, let's go tell this Daniel because it's the right thing to do. You would expect that if somebody was cheating on you. So I applaud these women for what they did. Mia and I decided to stay for a few more hours to clean up the place so she wouldn't get charged the $1.30 cleaning fee. We of course talked about Lily's predicament and thought about what we were going to tell our boyfriends. So they were contemplating, oh boy, they're going to find out, how do we spin this? Mia called Lily and eventually she answered. Lily was crying hysterically so they didn't talk long. Mia said Lily told her Daniel locked her out of the house and told her he wanted a divorce. She was at her parents' house and was in the process of telling them, so she had to go. Mia hung up the phone and just started crying. I knew she felt terrible as renting the cabin was all her idea. Mia and I left the cabin just before noon and headed back to town in our own cars. About 20 minutes into the drive, Mia called me and frantically said her boyfriend called her and broke up with her right over the phone. He didn't want an explanation. He said he knew everything and that they were done. Apparently, Daniel told him all about what had happened. Hearing this, I felt terrible for Mia. She and her boyfriend lived together and were planning on getting married next year. While the whole situation with Mia and Lily was awful, my main concern was Evan and what I would say to him if he found out. I knew if Mia's boyfriend knew then, he probably already told Evan or would be telling him very soon as they had become good friends. I then decided to just call Evan to feel him out, but he didn't answer, so I texted him and nothing. I drove over to his apartment, but he wasn't there. I expected the worst at that point, and I was right around 1 o'clock. Evan gave me a call checking in on how things were going. I replied with a simple, fine. Curious, he inquired if I was still at the cabin, to which I responded with a negative. We decided to end the trip prematurely. Then came the question about whether we had a good time. I hesitated, unsure how to answer, and started babbling. That's when Evan cut in and bluntly asked if I enjoyed the company I had the previous night, diving straight into the heart of the matter. I was caught off guard and couldn't think of anything to say, so I just started apologizing and started crying, saying I was sorry. He interrupted me again and said not to apologize. He said I could do whatever I wanted. At first I thought he was sincere, but realized he was just being sarcastic. He just started laughing. I then asked him if we were through and he said, yes, of course. He said our girlfriend-boyfriend relationship was over as he isn't into non-monogamy. I said I wasn't either. And again with that, he just laughed at me. Well, what did you expect him to do? I realized what I said didn't make sense. Yeah, it didn't make sense. But he didn't have to be so cruel. He said we were back to being like we were before we started dating. just casual acquaintances. I told him I didn't want that. I wanted us. He again just laughed and told me to stop what I was sounding so ridiculous. I think she added the word, what there. I think she meant to say because I was sounding so ridiculous. I then asked him if I would be seeing him that night like we planned, and he said no. He told me he'd be shipping the stuff I kept at his apartment back to me, and to just toss out the stuff he had at my place as he didn't want it back. And that's it. He was done with me. This all happened exactly 2 weeks ago today, and I am broken. I pleaded with him through text to give me another chance. It's tough. He seems completely over it while I'm here missing him terribly. I bumped into him at the grocery store on Monday evening, and although we exchanged a few words, there was a noticeable distance in his demeanor. Our conversation was brief. He asked how I was doing and my response was simply terrible. He offered a brief reassurance that things would improve before making an excuse to leave. It's as if he's completely unaffected by everything that happened and has just moved on without a second thought. While I'm a broken mess, do you have any signs of what I could do to win him back? There's nothing you can do. Let me just tell you there's nothing you can do. She says I'm willing to do anything, including just being an FWB relationship for him, but I don't think he'd go for that. Well, of course he's not going to go for that because obviously this guy again is a high-value man. He wants a good woman who is going to be in a monogamous relationship with him. You've already proved it. You're not worthy of that. She says, I look forward to getting your replies. Thanks for reading this, Kim. So that's the end of her original post. And now for a few responses that she got back from the community. And in a few of these responses, she does respond back to the people that replied to her. Let's dive into these comments. Before we do, I want to encourage you, if you're enjoying this content, don't forget to hit that like button. Your support ensures this video reaches people all around the world. Now, onto the responses. The first one is from a guy who says, sorry Kim, I don't have any sympathy for you. You say Evan is the love of your life and yet you had an encounter, probably unprotected, with a complete stranger, someone you described as a beast. Not only are you not relationship material, but you are also downright dangerous. Have you ever heard of little things called STIs? She responds, of course, I'm concerned about STIs and got tested the following week. I'm all clear, I never put Evan's health in danger. Plus, I can assure you I will never do something like that again. This guy now responds back to her and says, if you got tested right after, you should wait a few weeks and get tested again. As I've heard, sometimes these pathogens do not show up on tests until weeks later. Next, here's a response from a woman. She says, what you did was completely reckless. Let me get this straight. You meet a guy at a swimming pool in the afternoon and have a casual conversation. Then at midnight, he comes over and you let him in, have a couple of drinks, and then take him right up to bed. I don't want to be harsh, but you've got real problems and need to work on yourself. Have you seen a therapist about this? She responds, I haven't yet, but I'm going to. It just seems when I drink, I become another person altogether, someone I don't recognize. Then when I sober up, I realize what I've done and I'm full of regret. I know the simplest solution is to quit drinking, and I've already done that. Acknowledging that is a positive start. However, I still plan on seeing a therapist to delve into why I behave in this manner. You mentioned that I engage in these relationships with men because I desire them. You also pointed out that I use alcohol as a means to facilitate these connections, and sometimes as an excuse, much like what's happening here. And we've got another response from a woman. She said what you did was careless. However, Adam sounds like he may be somewhat insecure and therefore may have a tendency to become controlling of the women he dates to deal with his insecurities. So here goes another one of these modern women calling a guy who has standards insecure and controlling. Have we heard that before? Are you sure this is someone you'd want to have a relationship with? I may be wrong, but I thought I'd bring this to your attention. She responds, Adam is not like that at all. He told me I can do what I want with my body, but he doesn't want to be in a relationship with me anymore. He just can't understand. It seems like he might not believe me when I assure him that what happened was a mistake and that I won't do it again. He keeps reiterating that it's too late for any reconciliation, using the phrase, can't square that circle, which signifies an impossible task. Well, Opus, what that essentially means is you're asking for something that can't be achieved. You made a mistake, and you're hoping he'll completely overlook it. This isn't the first time something like this has happened, is it? In fact, it feels like all three of us women might have been in similar situations before, considering how easily this unfolded with those guys. We got another response from a woman. She says, whatever happened to Lisa and Maya? How did things turn out for them? I hope all three of you girls were able to save your relationships, as I sincerely believe you've learned your lesson and will never do that again. She responds, Maya and her family are no longer speaking with Lisa and they blame Lisa for everything because it was her idea to rent the cabin. Last I heard, her husband had filed for divorce and they had put their house up for sale. From what I understand, Maya has never gone back to her home, as Gina and Cheryl have made sure everyone in that neighborhood knows their business. So again, they're throwing shade at Gina and Cheryl. But Gina and Cheryl are really the heroes here. She continues, as for Lisa, she's still living with her boyfriend, but they are no longer a couple. They are now just roommates, and he made her sign on to the remaining months of the lease to keep living there. She's now paying half the rent and utilities, where before she was just buying their groceries. So she's paying for half the rent and utilities. But if I were this guy, I would have just made her move out. She's still trying to get him back, but has made no progress. He's handling this just like Adam. No, he's not, because he's still living with his ex-girlfriend or ex-fiancée or whatever she was. And that's a big mistake. Number 1, there's going to be animosity because of what she did. Why do you want to live in the same space with her? Number 2, she could falsely accuse you of something. Number 3, she's going to slowly try to reel you in, and she's probably going to be successful. So what he's doing here is a big mistake, even though it may sound good. Oh, you know, now I got her sharing the space and she's paying half the rent and half the utilities. No, what you want to do in these situations with a breakup is you want to get her out of your life and move on while she's still living there. You're never going to be able to move on. And we'll wrap it up with another reply from a guy. He says, I vote for Grace and Claire as Women of the Year. These ladies are obviously high-value conservative women who still have morals and values. One day I hope to marry a woman like that. I don't know the complete history of Grace and Claire, but from what they did here, I think it was very noble. They did the right thing and I applaud them for that. So now let's cover the morals of this story. Number 1, men need to have standards and stick to them. Don't listen to all of this modern talk out there about guys who have standards, are controlling, or they're insecure. That's a bunch of BS. As a man, you need to have standards and you need to stick with them. Number 2, these standards should be clearly known by your girlfriend, fiancé, or wife. You should have red lines, meaning if they cross that, then there are going to be repercussions. If you go out and have a girls' night out and you do anything inappropriate, guess what? We're breaking up. That's a red line that you crossed and it's over. They need to understand those boundaries. Number 3, girls only get-togethers and trips are nothing but trouble and should be a non-starter. You know, now, if a couple of women, hey, you want to go out to a pottery making class or they want to go out shopping together, nothing wrong with that. Okay, occasionally doing that kind of stuff, but going out to clubs, bars, cars, going on vacations, going to Las Vegas, or places like that. No, those are non-starters, and that definitely should be a red line that is never crossed. And then finally, and I have to remind everybody of this because sometimes we're all down on women, especially modern women. But there are still a lot of good women out there, gentlemen. They're just getting harder and harder to find. Like I've said in some of my videos, I believe 1/3 of the women out there are high-value, high-quality, traditional conservative women that are relationship material. The problem is trying to find one in modern society is like trying to find a diamond in a coal mine. They're out there, but it's going to take a lot of work and a lot of time to sift them out. So those are my thoughts on this story. And now I want to hear from you. What did you think of this story and how these guys handled the situation? Have you ever been in a situation where your girl had a crazy girls' night out or a girls' trip and it ruined your relationship or blew up your relationship?